Oh, I unmuted the wrong microphone. There we go. User error. Have you heard of the picnic error? Problem between computer and chair. That was what it was this time around. The problem was in between the computer and chair, which is me. So, if we haven't met before, my name is James Follen, and I believe the world of Australian wine is beautiful and complex. So I create videos for wine lovers to learn more about the world of wine. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. Thank you for joining me back here in the barrel room for the 12 wines of lockdown. Tonight is the 8th live stream out of the 12, streaming 12 times in 14 days for the 12 wines of lockdown. So here we are, and tonight we are talking about 7 tasty pairings for dessert and wine. So let's get into it. And let me know what you're drinking, if you haven't already, in the chat. As we prepare to talk about the 7 tasty pairings for dessert and wine, I'm sipping on something I've been working on a few nights, the Tulloch's Polka Bean Dry Red Shiraz. Let's see if we can get that in focus on the camera. Will it do its thing? A little bit. My green screen effect doesn't work so nicely. What is dry wine, and is it necessary? We'll jump into that as we start thinking about the dessert wine. So dry wine is just a style of wine. So coming from the previously fortified wines, the Paul Colban Dry Red label for Shiraz was made as part of the premium red wines in Australian. So coming away from style fortified wines, which were a lot sweeter. So it was relatively dry compared to the sweet fortified wines that people would have previously seen. And the fortified wines are things that people might associate more with the dessert wine category, sweeter, and pairing with desserts as such. So, as we get into it this evening, these dessert and wine pairings are ideal for any dining experience, whether it's for a Valentine, an anniversary, or an indulgent meal. When it comes to pairing food and wine, the secret is to consider wine as an ingredient. It adds the extra pizzazz, that extra little bit of taste on top, which enhances the meal, enhances the taste, and creates an entirely new flavor profile. And desserts are no different. In fact, making the perfect dessert and wine pairing can be an incredible way to end a memorable evening. So in the case of thinking about a dry red wine, it is kind of richer, but in terms of a memorable meal and a memorable evening, pairing kind of a big, bold red wine with a big, juicy steak. They have the weight that balances each other out and comes together. So I'd say this one's more of a medium body. So it's not as rich as some of the richer wines that I've tasted, especially when this Shiraz is compared against something like Cabernet Sauvignon, which has more of a punch to it. And white wine, as I see that question come up in the chat, is different part of the wine making process, and I'll touch on that as we go through these wine pairings. So looking at the first pairing, thinking about a strawberry shortcake with a Chenin Blanc bubbly. So the example that they use of a Vorey Brut made with Chenin Blanc grapes, it is a crisp wine with mouth puckering white wine that adds notes of green apple, pear, and honeysuckle. And if you're looking for something familiar but also unique, check out the sparklers from South Africa, where Chenin Blanc is a super important grape. Chenin Blanc is a more of an alternative white grape varietal when it comes to wine and the cheese or wine pairings. As I see a question come in about cheese. So one of my favorite cheeses at the moment that's currently in the fridge that I'm looking forward to cracking open or finishing off Friday night is a smoky bacon cheddar cheese. A little bit of aged vintage on it. It's got a little bit of bite to it. that is really enjoyable with a nice red wine. And coming along from that is white wine. It's significantly different. White wine is when you press a grape, the juice is clear. You get red wine because the skins of the grape are left on in the juice so that the skins give the color to the white juice from the grape juice to make a red wine after fermentation. And white wine is often the process where it's just the grape juice that gets pressed out in the process, and the in-between is rosé, when the skins are only left on for a few hours to give that little bit of a pinkish tinge to the wine as part of that. And yes, I do like whiskey, but I have probably not touched it for over a year just because I finished it up last lockdown, the last bottle that I had. So why does this wine pairing work with strawberry shortcake and this Chenin Blanc white wine? The acidic bite that comes from the Vevey Brut slices right through the shortcake and the whipped cream, while the notes of tree fruit beautifully complement the fresh strawberry flavour. Plus, this Brut wine is made using the traditional method, which adds a biscuity note that tastes amazing with treats already creamy ingredients. So that biscuity, toasty note that they're mentioning there comes from the traditional method, the Meshno Traditional, which you see in the wine making process that comes through in the region of Champagne that makes champagne wine. But Champagne has a copyright over the brand of Champagne because they're an exclusive region. So you can get champagne wines that are sparkling white wines that are made in the method traditional style. And the fermentation process for champagne and all wines is the fermentation, which is converting the sugar into alcohol. I can't remember if that's fructose. I'd have to look up a diagram to unpack that question a lot more. So looking at the next pairing, the peach cobbler with a dry Riesling. So the rich fruit and a welcome burst of acidity. So the dry Riesling, Germany's favorite wine. Riesling can run the gamut from sweet to bone dry and carries some amazing notes of citrus and green apple with it. Especially apparent in dry Riesling is a slaty sense of minerality, which only furthers its complexity. The Clare Valley is a well-known wine region for the Rieslings that they can produce. One of the wineries I came across was called Riesling Freak, where they make a huge range of Rieslings from that sweet side of the spectrum towards the dry end of the spectrum. One of my favorite Rieslings that I can call off the top of my head is the Langmeil Live Wire. It's more of a sweeter style of Rieslings with some green apple coming through there, which my wife and I really enjoy. And this pairing of dry Riesling with the peach cobbler works because the bright acidity and the fruit flavors has a cut through with the dry Riesling, or the dry Riesling cuts through the syrupy sweetness of a peach cobbler while only enhancing the dessert's fruitiness. So this is an example where contrast is playing out. So one contrasts the other to accentuate the different flavors. So the earthier tones that are present in German Riesling, like the one from the Mosel Valley, will accentuate the flaky crust of a cobbler while it's enhancing its more subtle sweetness. So as we go along, feel free to pop questions in the chat, and I'll glance to the side every now and then and see if I can answer any of those for you whilst I'm in the middle of the live stream. So moving on to the next combination, white chocolate with a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. So this article's written from a perspective of Americans. They've got a different kind of wine industry over there, so they're not necessarily on the ground and in the scene of Australia and New Zealand wine as much as we are down south. So thinking about Sauvignon Blanc, New Zealand, the Marlborough region from New Zealand is something that is notable, but there's also plenty of good Australian Sauvignon Blanc that could bring out that telltale passion fruit aroma than any other wine in the world. New Zealand just happens to be well recognized for it. So as this talks about the New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, and studies have shown that New Zealand brings out more of the telltale passion fruit aromas in wine than any other Sauvignon Blanc in the world. The Kiwi standard for Sauvignon Blanc has far more fruit to it than its greener old world cousins, and that has a lot to do with why it's so popular today. Why it works, all of those rich, fruity aromas take the understated balance of white chocolate and add a layer of fruit that doesn't overpower. So take a sip of Sauvignon Blanc after a bite of white chocolate, and suddenly you'll probably swear you're enjoying a fruit cream mousse because of the way that it balances. So grapes are always the primary fruit of wine. Grapes are also usually the only fruit for wine. When you have something made from apples, you get a cider. When you have something made and fermented from pears, you get a perry. When you have something fermented from honey, you get a mead. So wine can only be made from grapes. I have some other interesting wine styles that are sweeter, made from things like peaches, from mangoes. I actually have just behind me a mango wine from Queensland, so I probably should drink this sooner rather than later because of the fruitiness of it. But just taking a small detour to talk about this. This isn't technically wine. So this is made from fermented mangoes from Queensland, which is fruit. So it shouldn't technically be a wine, but it's bottled in a bottle that looks like a bottle of wine, but it's really just fermented mango juice that's in here. But it's that process of sugars converting into alcohol that makes that possible. So I'll just put that back in the rack as we jump back in to the screen share. Moving on to thinking about lemon bars. So we're thinking about an oaky Chardonnay. An oaky Chardonnay is not necessarily my preferred wine. I think oaky Chardonnay is something that is my last preference. If I was choosing from 10 wines, oaky Chardonnay would probably be at the bottom of that list. But let's see why they go together. So it's matching the sweet and the tart for note. So this oak Chardonnay has the creamy addition of oak to the bracing flavors of apple, pear, and lemon peel, for something that's quite polarizing for many modern drinkers who may have had one too many butter bombs to appreciate this style. The truth, however, is that a great number of amazing oaked Chardonnays exist in the world, and their versatility is one of their great strengths. So, Chardonnay is an incredibly versatile wine as part of this. So why it works, the pairing of the shortbread crust and the tang of a lemon bar with oaked Chardonnay is a truly complementary parallel. The tree fruit and citrus of the wine bring out even more zip from the lemony top of the dessert, while the buttery oak is a natural companion to the rich, flaky crust beneath. So those two things playing together, working well and working alongside each other. This one is probably the one I'm most excited about when I think about the pairings on this list here today. I'm a bit of a fan of carrot cake. A nice carrot cake tickles my fancy. When it comes to kind of sweets, it kind of pretends to be healthy because it has the word carrot in it, and carrot's a vegetable. You should eat lots of vegetables. So carrot cake has spice and sweetness combined with a little tanginess on the side. So a Fino sherry, the driest of sherries, Fino sherry lacks the heavy sweetness that many of its darker cousins are known for, taking on a lighter, more subtle notes of almonds, salinity, and a touch of citrus, while the heavier, Oloros, so sherries, often serve as dessert all on their own. Finos understands flavors can be paired with foods far more easily. And this works because the spiciness to carrot cake pairs beautifully with the nuttiness of a sherry. And Fino is dry enough that it won't taste cleanly sweet on top of that inch thick vanilla cream cheese frosting. Additionally, many Fino sherries have a tangy jackfruit flavour that contrasts wonderfully with the earthier flavour of the carrot cake itself. So those things pairing, thinking about the spectrum of sherries, it's talking about there's ones at that sweeter end on the sherry scale, the sweeter end, and that drier end, probably similar to the dryness that you see in something like the Shiraz that I'm drinking now. And this would probably be the number 2 that I'm thinking about, the chocolate mousse with a risotto. So the richness of chocolate with lightning bolts of fruit from the wine. So the bruschetto d'Acqui, with its lighter body and red berry notes, this semi-sparkling Italian red offers some sweetness without being too overpowering. And frankly, if you don't have a dessert ready, a bottle of bruschetto can be perfect all on its own. And why it works, the sweet little bubbles are going to cut straight through the heavy creaminess of a chocolate mousse while adding sharp texture and notes of candied fruit and red flowers. It's like eating a chocolate-covered strawberry, but with more sparkle. Chocolate and lightning bolts of fruit, I'd say a equivalent that you're probably better off at finding in Australia is a Rosado, which is a Rosé and a Moscato. So the Rosé bringing through the strawberries and potentially the Moscato bringing through a bit more of that fruitiness and some sparkle, depending on how that style is made and that style is put together to bring the dance between the chocolate mousse out. I love that imagery of you're tasting a chocolate covered strawberry, potentially a very fruity Pinot Noir would also work with that for a similar reason, that chocolate mousse and the strawberry notes that come from that as well. And as I look at the chat for a few more questions, is there such thing as burning coffee, like putting boiling water straight on coffee grounds? I don't believe you burn coffee from the water you put on them, because water will only boil at 100 degrees, and also depending on what your elevation is for boiling point at sea level. But you will probably get burnt sensations from coffee from one of two things. They burnt the coffee beans when they were roasting them, so that'd be a dark roast. Or if you're getting like a latte or a cappuccino and the milk was heated up too much, you may have burnt milk in your coffee, and that's where maybe the burnt coffee flavor comes from. But I think it's pretty much impossible to burn coffee beans in something like a long black or an espresso, because it's not possible to heat the water much higher than 100 degrees without it turning into steam. So jumping into Gewürztraminer and apple pie. This would be number 3 on my list for pairings to try of wine and dessert here this evening. So apple pie, take the apple classic pie and add a dozen more fruits to it. Gewürztraminer is powerfully aromatic, and Gewürztraminer is known for its perfume of lychees, rose, citrus, and spice. So perfume is just a fancy way of the wine smells like a little bit of lychees, rose, citrus, and spice. When you swirl your glass and give it a sniff to see what's going on there and just get a sense of how the wine is going on. And it works because Gewürztraminer combines fruit and spice in the same way a warm apple pie does, making it one of the most obvious dessert and wine pairings on the list. Apple and citrus, cinnamon and ginger, crust and lychee, it all combines deliciously without being an overpowering explosion. So while some wines make perfect desserts all on their own, there's no reason not to look for the perfect after dinner treats to complement them. So tell us about what your favorite dessert and wine pairing would be. Do you have anything? Let me know in the chat what your favorite dessert would be. And feel free to throw out any desserts that I may have missed in these 7 tasting pairings for dessert, and I'll try and look up one now. So yes, when we talk about coffee, was changing from instant coffee to coffee beans one of the biggest coffee upgrades I made. I think I never really was into instant coffee, so I didn't have that as an experience in terms of getting that level of difference. I think it was probably learning to make coffee correctly. So not just like, imagine making coffee like tea, where all of a sudden you kind of pour the hot water over the coffee and then you try and then tip the coffee into a mug. That wasn't working for me. So knowing how to make coffee and understanding brew times was something that worked really well. And a great video that I saw recently was James Hoffman was talking about a coffee cake. So this was awesome hearing about how this one worked. I'll throw the link into the chat if you're interested in watching that back later on, but talking about how good quality espresso can make a delicious and better quality carrot or a bit better quality coffee cake, because it brings through that stronger coffee flavor as part of bringing out a dessert as part of that. But learning how to make coffee was probably the biggest upgrade I've made. I think the AeroPress and freshly grinding my beans was also a big part of that as well. So yeah, let me know if I've missed any desserts that you want me to talk about in the chat below, and I'll be able to answer that question for you. And if you're enjoying this content this evening, make sure you press that like button. So yep, you feel like ice cream was missed, not mousse. So suggest some ice cream. I'm going to go straight off the bat with vanilla ice cream. So vanilla ice cream is one that I'm thinking of when I think about what goes well together with what works together as part of wine pairings. One that I think of immediately that I'm not sure if is available, Kevin, so Bell's orange marmalade was something that they used to have on the wine menu. Let's see if I can hunt it down just quickly. The wine special oak age 20. I might save that one to go look at later. So I think it was called the Sticky. I've got a bottle of this in my fridge. My wife absolutely loves it. So putting a drizzle of this kind of sticky sweet Sobel's, it's from a late harvest Verdelho. So imagine kind of marmalade, honey, and sun-dried apricots with a taste of this wine, which leaves a clean and soft finish to it to pair really nicely with the vanilla wine. So that kind of standard vanilla flavor would go quite nicely with this. And another one I would be a fan of would be the Green Angel from Hondorf Hill. I'm hoping that they still have some of it. So this Green Angel is a wine that they make. Can I find a little bit of a description? Yeah. So it's a late harvest Gruner. So Gruner is the Austrian word for green, and Gruner Veltliner is an Austrian grape varietal that has been recently imported into Australia and is doing it. So I've got to hide some of this in the cellar. This wine will develop for 30 to 40 years. I'm excited by that. My wife loves this wine. It's delicious. So the grapes for the wine are allowed a very extended period of ripening, during which time the berries shrivel and thereby concentrate the flavour, the sugar, and the natural acidity. Since the climatic conditions required to achieve this are quite specific, this wine will only be made in exceptional years. The juice is fermented till the desired alcohol level is achieved, leaving a residual amount of sugar in the wine. This residual sweetness is kept in balance by a high natural acidity. The rich yet delicate nose is laid with spice, lemon zest, poached pear, and meringue. The palate is unctuous yet lively with fresh citrus, delicate poached fruits, white pepper, and a lively long tail, perfectly matched with your favourite dessert or chocolate and a runny ripe brie cheese. That wine will develop well for 30 to 40 years, and that is a good thing to know as part of that. But cutting back to thinking about, well, the question that's just come in, how many different types of wines do you have in your fridge currently? I currently have, just thinking about it, I have a bottle of sparkling wine in the fridge. I have a bottle of Moscato in the fridge, got a bottle of that Green Angel in the fridge, got a bottle of that sticky Verdelho in the fridge, as well as I don't think I've got a Gewürztraminer anymore. Just finished off a Gruner Veltliner from Tempest 2 with my wife over dinner with pasta, a spaghetti sauce. So I've probably got at least 5 different varieties of wines in the fridge. But yeah, if we were talking about my total wine collection, I've got over 100 bottles of different types of wine. So is sparkling wine the same as champagne? No, not all sparkling wines are made equal. If you want to go looking for a sparkling wine that is made, you want to look for something that is made in the method traditional style. So method traditional Australia is thinking about the traditional method for producing champagne, but champagne is something that is designated by the wines made in France. There's a series of processes and steps that go into it. You can make sparkling wine without making the wine using this process that's associated with champagne or the same blend. Sometimes people might infuse it with carbon dioxide. An example is a sparkling Shiraz. So I often think of the Langmile. I'll go back to my search so you can see that. The Langmile Sparkling Shiraz Cuvée. So this is something of a wine, not this particular wine, but it's a style of a sparkling Shiraz Cuvée that Australia can lay claim to with how it's made it famous, and it's a style that first appeared in the 1888 with the style there. So going through a process where this bottle fermented Shiraz and its cuvee left on leaves for 24 months with own vintage fortified Shiraz. It's a wine for all occasions. So that goes through that kind of process, kind of differentiating. Not all sparkling wine is the same as champagne. You can also get things like Prosecco and Cava, which are made with different grape varieties. but sometimes people will carbonate them as well. What is the most exotic drink I've ever had? And is there a certain wine you'd pair with salty food? So I'll tackle the salty foods question first. So looking at this kind of little diagram, thinking about how fat, salt, acid, sweet, bitter, and piquant, which is kind of spicy, all interact. This influences what you think about when you think about a wine pairing. So I did an episode that dived into this a lot more. But if you think about like a cheese that is more salty, you might want to go for a sweet wine. So like a sweeter style of Riesling, Moscato would go alongside that well. So thinking about a sweet wine with a salty food, potentially a port as well to balance that out. But they're kind of the rough kind of rules that you think about when you pair different flavors and things as part of it. And there's also the saying that what grows together goes together. So thinking about Italian wine varieties that go well with pizza and the tomatoes that they produce there. And what is the most exotic drink you have ever had? Well, that is one that is a question for the ages. I think when you say drink, have you heard of the king of all fruits? The durian. The durian plant is something that is unique and special. It's also known as the smelliest fruit in the world, but it tastes quite sweet, and having like a durian juice is something that is an special experience. So it's known as the king of fruits, especially throughout Asia. It tastes like heaven, but smells like hell is a description I've heard of it. And the smell is so pungent and strong, which is why I'm calling this the most exotic drink I've had, that unpleasant odor has meant people have been, I think, evacuated from Melbourne Uni. I think that was the story, because they thought there was a gas leak, but someone just brought in durian. So they evacuated people from the science labs because they thought there was a gas leak, when in fact it was just the pungent smell of durian. But it just tastes so good. It's like something that you've never tried before. So you just need to get over the smell and taste it and see. But make sure you try and open it outdoors, because you will smell it across the other side of the room. This isn't something you'd want to try and hide in your lunchbox in the office because of how strong it smells. So well sealed packages. So durian is the most exotic drink I have ever had. So please let me know if you've got any more questions in the chat about different types of dessert and wine pairings that I could answer. If you're enjoying this content, please leave a like if you haven't already. And if you're tuning in for the replay, leave a comment below, ask me any questions, and I can potentially make a video about that and answer it then. Or if you leave the comment more quickly enough in the coming few days, I might even be able to answer it in one of my next live streams. Currently tonight is 8 of 12 of the 12 wines of lockdown live streams that I'm doing, aiming to go live 8 p.m. each night, except for Sunday. I'm starting to be more disciplined about picking the topics instead of just doing it the hour beforehand and scheduling it on YouTube, so you can click the reminder button to be reminded of it. I think I've scheduled tomorrow's night for 8:30 p.m. to make sure I have a time, because I'll be coming straight from a meeting. So making sure I have enough time to get stuff ready for that at 8:30 p.m. for tomorrow night's live stream. And is there a point where coffee can be too bitter? Potentially, if depending on how that it's made, it will be up to you. So The difference, if you've heard of a ristretto, I'll go and look up a ristretto to try and better explain it, that when the espresso shot comes through, it's made from the same amount of a single shot, but I think it comes out slightly stronger. So thinking about the bitterness, let me just cut over and go into a segue about coffee thing, because you can also pair coffee. The bitterness can pair well with a vanilla ice cream. So like an espresso and ice cream, that's where you get the affogato from. I was thinking about ristretto versus espresso. So unless you're a barista, you may not know what ristretto is. In short, it's a concentrated variation of espresso. And that is what is something, I think it either makes it more bitter or sweeter. So let's start with the basics. A shot of espresso consists about, I don't know, 1 to 3 Oz, 1 to 3 pounds of concentrated coffee with an intense flavour. To pull shots of espresso, the machine forces hot pressurized water through packed grounds. This extracts the bold flavours that make espresso so distinctive, and the extraction takes between 20 to 30 seconds, depending on the settings and calibrations the machine is used. Many customers order a double, or called a doppio, and some even order triple shots of espresso. So there are 3 parts in a shot of espresso: the darker body at the bottom, the lighter heart in the middle, and the light crema on top. The air bubbles in the crema give espresso its signature and aroma and aftertaste. Espresso may be served black or with sugar. Why would you want to put sugar in espresso? That's ruining it. A ristretto is pulled from an espresso machine using the same process. The difference is that it is for a shorter amount of time with half the raw water, resulting in a very concentrated shot of espresso. The variation in water and extraction time creates 3 differences between ristretto and regular espresso: quantity, taste, and caffeine level. So quantity, since a ristretto shot is made with half the raw water, the result is a smaller shot. And the taste, so the ristretto may come across as more bitter because it produces a more concentrated, bolder flavour, but it also has a sweeter finish than an espresso. So sometimes if you leave your coffee in more, it will... Yes, I do find it hard to believe people ruin coffee with milk and a lot of sugary additives. It's like, you get to a point... I'm going to transition to this slide. Gets to a point with coffee when you've added so much milk and so much sugar. Have you added like a little bit of coffee to a smoothie? Or is it it's almost like a coffee flavored smoothie at that point? It's not really coffee anymore. You've moved from like the long black, the espresso, the pure coffee expressions. I enjoy kind of what I like to call the promised land special with a latte. So coffee, milk, and honey all mixed in together. That's probably kind of my delicious special treat, special occasion kind of a thing. But there's a point where you've added too much to it and it's no longer really coffee. It's more like a coffee flavored milkshake that's warm. It gets to me. It gets to me. But going back to the kind of a question about it being bitter, I think if you've roasted it too dark, it can also be too bitter and overpowering. I prefer kind of a lighter roast of coffee because it brings out more kind of nuanced floral notes that remind me of this kind of the characteristics that I really enjoy about wine. And yes, I would love to visit both a coffee or wine making facility. So wineries and celladors, I've had the fortune of visiting some of them. I haven't actually seen kind of a winery in action. I'd love to make and bottle my own wine one day in the future. That's like a bucket list goal for me, to be able to make my own bottle of wine, buy some grapes, crush them, barrel them or put them in a fermenter. I was listening to this great podcast about concrete fermenters that talk about that they're more efficient, a bit more expensive initially, but they have a longer life than oak barrels, easier to clean, and that they are better in terms of storage because you can make a square and rectangular thing. And I watched a great video on how coffee is made, and I find it fascinating how a little red seed thing turns into coffee. Yes, the process. I'm going to get up and go on a little tangent because I've got a book on my bookshelf called The World Atlas of Coffee that I can jump into. So thinking about coffee, I'm a big fan of coffee. So I'm a big nerd. This is a book by James Hoffmann. I love James Hoffmann's YouTube channel. If you're not subscribed, make sure you're subscribed to James Hoffmann on YouTube. He creates great content about coffee. I'd be aspired to be like the wine version of James Hoffmann one day if I knew enough about wine to make good quality content like he is. But it's just an incredible book that talks about just like, it's not probably going to work with my green screen effect, but like the process of harvesting coffee. It goes into it, like the process of like the drying of the coffee as well. Like the quality there that I'm trying to get into frame as I wrestle with the book, like those red little seeds coming together. It's an awesome experience. And it talks like the natural process for washing has some really interesting diagrams for how the process is. I think the honey wash is one of the weirdest processes, and the honey process is similar to the pulped natural process, but used in a number of Central American countries, including Costa Rica and El Salvador. And this coffee is mechanically depulped, but the method uses even less water than the pulped natural process. The depulping machine can usually be controlled to leave a specific percentage of flesh on the beans. The resulting coffee is then referred to as 100% honey or 20% honey, for example. The name miel is a Spanish term for the fruit mucilage, meaning honey. With larger quantities of flesh being left on the beans, there is a higher risk of fermentation and defect when the coffee is dried. So that's something similar where the world of coffee and wine overlap, that those sugars can ferment. That'd be a really interesting thing to hunt down if I could find like a weird fermented coffee bean and try that and see what that tastes like. Could also be really disappointing because you might be mixing two things that should not be mixed. But James Hoffmann is producing great things. So often, the coffee cherries are sorted and cleaned to remove unripe and overripe fruit, as well as leaves, soil, and twigs. And this is often done by hand using a sieve to winnow away on unwanted materials. So some great stuff going on there in the book. So that's a picture of a guy with that sieve doing the coffee beans through that to help sort them and filter them and figure those out. And it's just an awesome book. I probably don't read this enough. I need to like sit down and really dig into it and think about it. I really also enjoy the traceability that comes in coffee. You know where the origin comes from, you know where your coffees came from, where it was grown, and hopefully it helps give you a better reflection of the conditions, and you get to think about the labor and the people looked after. Pizza, banana on pizza. I've also seen durian on pizza. I think that's like in the that's borderline the category of pineapple on pizza. It'd make Raphael Esposito roll in his grave. And Raphael, the story of Raphael Esposito is a great one. Raphael. So this one is a great story. Knowing from something that began in Naples. The story of modern pizza, as we know, began in Naples, Italy in the late 1800s. Baker Raffaele Esposito is usually given credit for baking the first pizzas with tomato sauce, cheese, and toppings. According to the legend, pizza was popularized when Esposito was asked to make a pizza for Italian King Umberto I and Queen Margherita when their royal pair visited Naples in 1889. Esposito allegedly baked 3 different pizzas. The Queen's favourite was the one in which Esposito had designed in honour of Italy's red, white and green flag. It had basil, mozzarella, cheese and tomato sauce. Esposito named it Pizza Margherita in her honour. Pizza, however, failed to immediately take hold in Italy. As Italian migrants and immigrants came to the United States, pizza became with them. In 1905, the first United States pizzeria was established in New York City. The pizza called Lombardi's. I tried going to Lombardi's when I was in New York. I didn't have cash, so I didn't buy any. And I was really disappointed. I rode a bike across the Brooklyn Bridge to try and get there one day. That's bucket list kind of stuff. Still operates today. Soon other pizzerias in New York City and beyond appeared. By World War II, pizza was one of America's most popular foods, and in the 1950s, the Totino family in Minnesota was thought to have produced the first frozen pizzas. In 1958, Frank and Dan Carney borrowed $600 from their parents and opened a pizzeria in Wichita in Kansas. They called the restaurant Pizza Hut because they didn't have the space for additional letters on the first sign. Pizza Hut became very popular, and soon the brothers opened a new restaurant, and hence the first pizza franchise began. Similarly, Pizza Hut had Domino's spring up around the same time, and there's a monopoly on cheese in America for people who produce it and send it for. Same company produces cheese for Domino's and Pizza Hut in America with different recipes. So what wine do I enjoy drinking with pizza? I don't often go with a Shiraz. One that I'm going to be trying is the McWigan. I'm waiting to get out of lockdown and see my brother and to be able to try the McWigan Tempranillo. I'm hoping and there we go. Whoops. There we go. The McWigan Cellar Select. I have a bottle of the McWigan. No, that was the wrong one. The McWigan Cellar Select. So I have a bottle of the McWigan Cellar Select sitting on my shelf at home, ready to go, waiting for my brother to come out of lockdown so that I can enjoy 20% off Cellar Door exclusives. That's basically the discount that I have on my membership. So medium bodied fruit, premium parcel, dried Italian style wine. And I'm looking forward to pairing with pizza. The other one that I would go for is a Chianti. But yeah, a pizza pairing is definitely recommended and thought of there. One that I still need to pick up is the Langmo Montepulciano. I think Massimo Montepulciano, and it looks like that may have been sold out, or I may be clicking on the wrong thing. No, that's a Shiraz. I'm looking for a particular wine variety. This Montepulciano, so an Italian grape variety that is also in a blend here. I think they may have done it for 1 year. I enjoyed it when I tasted it. I'd want to put it back together with a pairing of pizza. But I also enjoy like a Shiraz, or if I did like a barbecue meat lover style pizza, bring out the Cabernet Sauvignon to pair with some of the meats on that. But yeah, thank you for asking questions here this evening. Let me know if you have any more as I get ready to close out the live stream here this evening. Thank you for tuning in. Tomorrow night I'll be going live at 8:30 p.m. instead of 8 p.m. to talk about the best buys from Audi. I have a little book next to me from back before the whole COVID thing hit. Got to go to the Sydney International Wine Competition and try some of the medal winning wines, and we'll be able to share some of the recommendations that came out of that, some of the award winners that were actually Audi wines, which I found to be really interesting. So we'll be sharing some of the best value wines or best value cheap wines from Audi tomorrow night. And did I see what you said before about the banana on pizza? Yeah, pineapple on pizza. No. Pineapple on pizza is a terrible, terrible idea. It insults the legacy of Rafael Esposito. Would make him turn and roll in his grave. Makes me want to cry thinking about pineapple on pizza. Makes me sigh deeply. I'm not a fan of pineapple on pizza. Pineapple best belongs in a fruit salad or in juice. Best put pineapple in juice. I like a pineapple juice. Not a fan of pineapple on pizza. Not at all. So thank you for tuning in this evening. Feel free to ask any comments about different pairings for dessert wines and their pairings with other wines in the chat. Are there any foods wine just doesn't work with? That's a really good question. I think I need to unpack that more in a next episode, or that could be potentially an episode for Thursday night. Are there any foods wine just doesn't work with? And what is my favorite pizza? My favorite pizza is the margherita made in the Neapolitan style. So that leopard spotting under the base of the pizza. Sorry, I bumped the microphone. That leopard spotting under the base of the pizza, cooked in a wood-fired oven, 90 seconds. Oh, bellissimo. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Fresh basil, fresh buffalo mozzarella. Oh. I may not stream. I might stream after lockdown. I won't be streaming daily. I might try and do maybe a stream once a week. I like the idea of potentially doing Wine Wednesdays. I'm a big fan of Wednesday and the alliteration that goes with Wine Wednesday. I have to keep the stream up. Thank you for the encouragement. How does Wine Wednesday sound? The Wine Wednesday could become a thing. I've done wine reviews previously where I've sat, sniffed, swirled, tasted a glass of wine, or what it tasted like. I might throw in a different wine and Fortnite. Do you like the wine and Fortnite? How would you rate wine and Fortnite out of 10? I could do some wine and Rocket League as well. See some of my skills in action. So tuning into Wine Wednesday, live episodes, potentially every Wednesday. Awesome. Loving the chat. 10 out of 10, 1,000 out of 10, 11 out of 10. So we could do a few more of those where I only get wine after I've won a game, after I've got a victory royale. Make me earn that victory royale. Make it worth it. So thank you for tuning in again this evening to talk about 7 tasty pairings for dessert and wine. Leave any questions in the chat and I might be able to answer them in a future video or in a future live stream. And if you're watching here on the replay, please comment below and I might be able to answer your question in a future video. And I'll see you in the next video and I'll see you tomorrow night on the next live stream as we talk about the best wines from Audi. See you then. James over and out.